looking at today is from Philippians, and this is just a snippet. This is 11 and 13, because this is what I want to focus on today. He says, I am not saying this because I am in need. He's not telling, we have to go back to 4, 6, and 7 when he was saying, be anxious for nothing, but in all things. He was trying to get the Philippians to realize it's not all about money. So when he was giving them an opportunity to help him, it wasn't because, yes, he needed him, but it wasn't because he was in dire straits. It was because he was giving them the opportunity to have the gift of giving. The opportunity for the reward in giving. Because he says, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. Whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. That is a pretty big chunk right there, isn't it? That's a lot to swallow. We're going to look that down. So the title today is When, Then. Apostle Paul's secret of contentment. We kind of just looked at that in Philippians. What is contentment? When, then. Maybe you see where I'm going there. When will I be content? Well, let's look at these pictures. Guy looks like he's pretty contented. Maybe he just got a big raise or a big promotion at work. Maybe the phone just quit ringing for 5 minutes. Oh, what about that? Sitting on the dock of the bay. There's a song about that. Which the cares go away. That would be content. What about sitting down in the morning in your favorite spot with your favorite cup of beverage? That's content. How about that? I don't know if you notice what he's actually reading, but he has the Bible in his lap. And he's laughing. He's so contented. 1 Timothy 6:7 says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and we can take nothing out of it. Do we live in a society right now that goes by these words? No, in fact, you probably even know the story of the gentleman who, before he died, he told his friend, he said, I want to be buried with all of my money. And the gentleman said, why? And he said, because I'm going to take it with me. Everyone says you can't, but I'm taking it with me to the afterlife. And so the day of the funeral, they were all standing around and they were looking at all this cash, and they were about ready to put it into the casket, and the one friend said, well, that's so sad that we're going to bury all that money. And the second one said, I know, just think of what we could use that money for. And the third one said, that's right, I got it covered. I wrote him a check, and he stuck it in the casket. We can't take it with us. We like to think of the things of this world, what we think is treasure. And I thought of another joke of the gentleman who showed up at St. Peter's, and he had his suitcase, and it was all, and St. Peter said, well, why do you have a suitcase? And he said, well, this is my treasure that I'm bringing with me. I'm so proud of it. He said, well, what's in there? And he said, it's all full of gold bars. And St. Peter looked at him and he said, why would you bring pavement? Perspective. We brought nothing into this world, and we literally can take nothing out of it physically. But what can we take out of it? Jesus tells us about the rewards we will get, the jewels in our crown. The rewards are from what we have done here on earth. That which we gave, that's what Paul was getting at the Philippines. Philippians said, he's like, if you give, that is the reward that you will be able to take with you. Every gem that you have said to someone else, every kind gesture you have done, everything that you have given cheerfully, That is what you're going to get to take to heaven. Now, contentment is a choice. Paul says that right there. He says, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret. Yes, the Bible's full of secrets, but they don't keep it there. Paul tells us that. The secret is that we need to be content in all and every situation. That's the gulp moment. In every situation? Say, but how can I be content? And especially when we constantly have advertisements and commercials telling us that we're not just hungry anymore, we're hangry. If we're hungry, we get angry, and we need to satisfy that with a Snickers or something else. Paul says you have to realize, we looked at Paul a little bit last week, and I said as a disciple, and this is just a little side note, I'm telling everyone at this church, go watch the FCC sermon because it's totally different than yours. And I'm telling the FCC people, go watch the PUCC because it's totally different than theirs. First few minutes might be the same, but not really, sort of. It's on the same thing. But they're both totally different, yet kind of the same thing and really good. But we were looking at Paul. And Paul saying he grew up, right? He grew up in a very wealthy home. He was very smart. He was very learned. He was high up in the rank in the military. Paul had it all. And Paul says, I remember that. And then when Jesus met him on that road, everything was stripped away. Not just the physical, literal of what I have, but his eyesight was stripped away. I want you just to think about that for a minute. I bet you Paul was thinking about this. I remember what it was like to have all my faculties, and then I remember what it was like when I didn't. That moment when he couldn't even see, and he didn't know if God was going to restore his sight or not. We know that he did, but Paul had to wrestle for those 3 days. And I had it, Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. He knew what it was like to live every day having full food, 2-3 meals a day, and celebrations. And then he knew when he's writing this, he had been in prison, he had been shipwrecked, he had been sold, he had had more days probably where he didn't eat than he did. He knew what it was like to be physically hungry, to be without royal clothes. So what is the finding contentment for us? Let me ask you. I bet you everybody here, at some point in your time, you're old enough, that you had those days where sometimes in your life you didn't have to worry. And maybe for some it was being a kid because your parents took care of it. And then for some of you that might have been the time when you were wanting because there was no food or there just was not the money to buy things. And then there's times where you're sitting pretty good. Maybe it's retirement. Maybe you worked your whole life so that way when you finally get to retirement you go, now I kind of have what I want. Maybe we can go where we want. Maybe we can do what we want. And then again, maybe you were waiting until retirement for that time, and when retirement comes, you find out that life took a turn, and now you're living only on a Social Security check. And you're finding yourself with more bills than you have money to pay. So what is it that we find our contentment? When is our contentment? Those pictures we looked at before. Is it when and then? When I can finally have that moments of peace. Maybe when you were a parent. When the kids are finally older, then I'll have time. Then I'll have the money to do what I want. Or maybe it was when you were younger. When I get a car, then I'll be happy. Then I can go places. And then you get that car, but it breaks down. And you go, well, when I get a car that works, then I'll be happy. And then you finally get that car. But then you go, oh, when I can get that new car, that shiny new car, then I'll be happy. And then it's Our family's bigger. Really, when I can get 2 cars or a car and a truck, then I'll be happy. We do that throughout our lives, don't we? When I can get that promotion, then I'll be happy. When the kids get off to college, then I can go do what I want to do and I'll be content. When, then. I am sure that each and every one of you has said those very lines at some time in your life. I like this picture because it's kind of the era we're living in right now. For most of you, you've probably been on Facebook or you know about likes and dislikes. For some, and right now this may not apply to you, but I know for our younger generation, when I can get more likes on my post than dislikes, then I will be somebody. When I can get more people on my platform, then I'm going to be somebody and people are going to like me. See, contentment comes in all different forms. It doesn't have to be just money. It doesn't have to be just things. It can be about personal appearance. It can be being likable, being popular, being famous. We've seen that. With social media, we have something more than we've ever had in history as far as instantaneous. You can take somebody from nowhere and something can go up viral on the web and instantly they can go from nothing to famous. Well, that's cool, but just like that, you can go from being nobody to on top of the world to in a moment being from on top of the world because something was said, a comment was made that unlike, and you can go right back to being nobody again. Our world is constantly trying to tell us what makes us content. Socrates said, and this is Socrates, he said, he who is not contented with what he has would not be contented with what he would like to have. Those are such wise words, right? Because if you're not contented with what you already have, it doesn't matter what you think will make you content, it won't. I had a thing for the children's sermon, and one of it was, it was a magic trick with different things that we think would make us content, and one was winning the lottery, right? If I just win the lottery, then I'll be content. When then? And we probably all have done this, right? Oh, Lord, just let me prove to you that I can be a good Christian if I win the lottery, and I'll give a 10th or 20 to you right off the top, and then, we start with our laundry list. But have you ever noticed that people who've won the lottery or have come into a lot of money, if they didn't have their priorities in order before, money only makes it worse. The attention only makes it worse. Socrates knew this centuries before. It says contentment is learned and earned. That's what Paul said right there in Philippians. For I have learned the secret. It's not just, we don't just get it. So don't feel bad. If you're like, I'm not really contented at this moment, don't beat yourself up. Because it's a learned trait. It doesn't come by natural. We live as carnal beings. We live with things that we want and desires we want to fulfill. Contentment is something that sets us above the earthly, above the mortal. We have to learn that whether we have plenty in front of us or we don't, that doesn't mean that we can't strive for more. That doesn't mean we can't have goals. It just means you don't spend every waking moment wishing and hoping and praying that you had something more. That you go, okay, God, what is it you want to show me right now? I say this because I remember, and I suppose it's been longer than, it seems like that long ago, when we were still back at Dunbar, my husband had been doing a lot of traveling. And when I say storm chasing, he didn't have the cool job of chasing tornadoes. He had the job of going in aftermath of storms and fixing and helping clean up. And so he was gone for like almost 4 years. And when he came back home, the economy wasn't great, and we were having a real hard time getting the company going again, and he kind of went into depression. He didn't realize it at the time, but now he will admit that. But he went into a time of depression, and we went into a time of a year where he was not working. And, you know, God provides. We had a retirement sort of started. So we had that to pull from, and that's what got us through that whole year. We didn't have retirement anymore now, but I remember at the time being so frustrated, going, God, please, you know, do something. And then the more I stopped and thought about it, it was like he had been so busy and such a workaholic, he had not been able to go to the kids' stuff so much. He was never around. He wasn't there. And all of a sudden now he was home all the time. And I was kind of like, Lord, give him something to do. Get him out of here. But then I sat back and I go, this too shall pass. Embrace it. It's a season. And I did. I just prayed. I was like, God's got this. We have food on the table. And he's going to get out of this and go back to work and be a workaholic again. But treasure the time that he's spending with the kids. And he did. He took the kids places. He did things with the kids that he hadn't been able to do. And guess what? That time passed. And he was back to working all the time again. But now it's a little more of a balance. So I had to learn that. That wasn't something that came natural. It took time with God, talking to God, that I realized that things do come and go. They ebb and flow, and that's just life. So I had to come to a point to cherish whatever that time was, however that time looked, even if it wasn't on my time scale or my schedule. John again says, it's up to us to choose contentment and thankfulness now, and to stop imagining that we would have to have everything perfect before we will be happy. I like that last line, because it's really kind of where we're at as a society, isn't it? It's not just that I want to be happy, but everything has to be perfect in my thought frame, in how I want it to go, in my control. Then I'm going to be content because I'm going to be happy. Is that even possible? That's not even earthly possible. Because even if we can get to the point where we can obtain that contentment and the happiness, it's going to be gone, just as fleeting as we got it, because we live in life. Life happens. Things happen out of our control. So we need to stop imagining that we have to have everything perfect, because it's not going to happen. We have to learn how to be happy in God. And Dale Carnegie, he said, it isn't what you have or who you are or where you are or what you are doing that makes you happy or unhappy. It's what you think about it. I like that. Because I suppose for each and every one of us, we thought, when I get that promotion, then I will be happy. Only to get that promotion and find out that it takes more time away from the family. Or we're gone more. Or we're exhausted more. And then we're not happy. Or we think, when the kids are all gone, and then I'll have all this time to do everything else. And then when the kids are gone, then you realize, well, now I don't have my family around me. And it's not what I thought it would be. It's not near as much fun. Now I have too much time on my hands. We're caught in that when, then. It's all in what you think about it. I like that last line of his. Contentment doesn't mean that I desire nothing, but rather it's a simple decision to be happy with what I have. And that's basically the whole theme of this. To be happy with what we have in the moment. We think of Job. Job was another man like Paul, who had it all. And in a moment, it was all taken away from him. And he was literally stripped down to nothing. And when everyone, including his wife, wanted him to curse God and die and get it over with, he refused to do it. He said, the Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. Those are big words. Could you be saying those words if you were in Job's position? If something happened tomorrow and everything was stripped from you, your house, your family, your health, your wealth, everything, Could you say those words? The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away, and I will be content in whatever situation He places me in. I think we would all be lying if we could just jump up and say, oh yeah, I would do that. That would be tough. But if we know Job's story, because he was faithful, what happened? God gave him back everything he had lost and then some. He increased everything tenfold. Didn't help with the family he lost, but he did end up with another family. He ended up with 10 times more wealth. He ended up with more land. He ended up with more, and it wasn't the materialistic. I know that he ended up with more faith. He ended up with more perseverance. And he ended up with more contentment. Paul tells the Hebrews then, he says in 13:5, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. And that was actually, I think, in a reference to even Job. Because through the whole thing, God was telling him, I'm not going to leave you. When you had it all or you have nothing, I am there. I have not forsaken you. I've not ignored you. I've not shunned you. Sometimes when we have it all, we're so busy and distracted with what we have that we don't spend the time looking to God. If I were to ask you, when do you think you would draw on God the most? When you're super busy and have it all? Or when it's all been stripped? Right? Sometimes God has to take it all away, so that way we will spend the time with Him. Contentment makes poor men rich, and discontentment makes rich men poor. I couldn't help but think of the story of Lazarus and the rich man in the New Testament. The rich man dies, and he didn't know God, he didn't know Christ, he was all about money. And he dies and he goes to hell. And he sees Abraham, and he sees Lazarus, who was a poor man. And he says, go back and tell all my family that this is what's awaiting them. They need to get rid of all the riches and focus on this. And he said, if they're not going to listen to me while I'm alive, they're not going to listen to me when I'm dead. We have to, I love this slide, because you could be the poorest person, but if you have your priorities in order, if you're content with whatever little you have and you're focusing on God, you are the richest person in the world. And yet, you could have everything that this world could possibly ever offer, and if you don't have Christ, you're the poorest soul in the world. So what are we really trying to achieve here with contentment? Peace, isn't it? When you're contented, you feel peace. You're okay with whatever happens. Because you know you're not in control, you don't have to be, God is. And this is contentment is a state of peaceful happiness. The art of being satisfied with each day that we are given. And you know that cliche that, well, we may not all have the same money. What do we all have? The same minutes in a day. We have the same days in a year. How do we spend that? How are you spending that time? Are you spending it constantly being restless and wanting more? When then? Or are you spending it day by day in contentment, no matter what that looks like? Whether it's 110 degrees outside or it's 30 below zero. Are you content with that state? You know you made the right decision when there's peace in your heart. Amen.